Welcome once again to another edition of Quick Trivia with Mike. It's the weekly game show right here on Channel 955 where we test your knowledge of facts, sometimes a little bit more historical in nature, sometimes very contemporary. Hopefully always a lot of fun. Let me just check on this. A lot of things about this week's show are going to be different. My cameraman and producer, Scott McFerrin, is on vacation this week. Cooper Ledvin is doing double duty, and I'm trying to fill in a little bit as well. We're also trying to get it done without access to some of the normal equipment. As a result of that, you probably don't recognize the backdrop here. I'm videotaping from my house this week, just so that we can bring this to you during our normal times. I am your host and the quizmaster, Mike Brever. We do not have a guest host this week. That's also because of Scott's vacation. Scott does a lot of editing to make those programs seamless. And again, he's not here this week, so we're just going to bring you the basics, and hopefully you'll enjoy it. You know that for the last several weeks now, maybe even months, we've begun Quick Trivia with Mike with a brand new tradition. The tradition is listing the birthdays of the week. You know, this week, we do have several. I'll read them off for you. On the 28th of October, Rudy Sundberg celebrates the 55th anniversary of his 29th birthday. On November 1st, Isabel Bader celebrates the 66th anniversary of her 29th birthday. On the 4th of November, Helen Love celebrates her birthday. And on the 6th of November, Jan Peltier celebrates her birthday as well. Happy birthday to all of you birthday kids out there, and if you run into any of them, just wish them a happy birthday from all of us right here at Quick Trivia. You know how the game works by now. We give you 3 questions each week, and we challenge you to come up with the answer. But before we get into that this week, I do have a special request from one of your neighbors. I was asked if I could research where the name for Bradford Avenue and Bradford Beach comes from. Mr. Church, Gil Church, this answer is for you. There was a gentleman by the name of James Murray in the 1840s, and he owned a great deal of land north of North Avenue. Mr. Murray named Bradford Avenue after John and Joseph Bradford. John and Joseph Bradford. The two brothers operated a dry goods store after their arrival in Milwaukee in the 1840s. Later, of course, they were joined by their brother and their third brother in the business, James Bradford. Now, ironically, you might think that there's a connection between the Bradford family and Bradford Beach down by Lake Michigan. Well, that's kind of true and kind of not. Bradford Beach was given the name because it lay directly east of Bradford Avenue. Bradford Beach has been a popular swimming spot for many years prior and was usually accessed by walking down from the bluff coming down from Bradford Avenue. That's where we get the name Bradford Beach. So Gil and anybody else who was interested, that is where the name Bradford comes from. It comes from the brothers, John and Joseph, who owned a dry goods store in the 1840s, and it was so named by James Murray, who owned the land that the street was located on. So there you have it. That is the mystery of where the name Bradford comes from. Let's get right into our 3 questions from last week, shall we? We're going to begin with Daniel David Palmer. You remember we talked about the fact that in many ways he was the founder of chiropractics. He really believed that there was more to medicine than just prescriptions and maybe a scalpel and things like that. He believed that there were things to realigning the spinal column and the nerve endings and things like that, letting the blood flow properly. Of course, you know, chiropractics is a very much loved science to this day. There are people that absolutely believe in it, more so than their doctors. My mother, for one, really believed that a chiropractor always gave her more relief than a doctor. So it really is a unique science, and there is something to it. Daniel David Palmer, however, leading into my question from last week, credited a person with helping him conceive chiropractics. And I asked you, who was it that Daniel David Palmer credited with giving him the idea for chiropractics? The answer was a gentleman by the name of Dr. Jim Atkinson. Dr. Jim Atkinson. The unique thing about Dr. Jim Atkinson, however, at the time of his sharing this information with Daniel David Palmer, was that Dr. Jim Atkinson was long since deceased. He apparently came to Daniel David Palmer as a ghost and shared with him the theory of chiropractics. So the ghost of Dr. Jim Atkinson co-founded chiropractics with Daniel David Palmer. And there you have it. That was the answer to question number 1. Question number 2, we talked a little bit about natural phenomena, specifically floods. We talked about the Johnstown flood, which really, May 31st, 1889, it was a terrible disaster. 16 million tons of water came down on the town of Johnstown. Took about an hour after dams broke before it reached the town. But it came like a giant fist, according to news stories of the time. 1,600 buildings were swept away. 2,200 people were dead. I pointed out several instances for you as well. I did point out, however, that not all floods were natural disasters. Some were man-made. I pointed out the flood that occurred during the Second Sino-Japanese War in June of 1938. The Chinese nationalist and communist troops intentionally destroyed several dikes on the Yellow River in an attempt to thwart the advancing Japanese army in their efforts to conquest all of China for its raw materials. From the flood itself, the subsequent disease and famine that spread as a result of it, 800,000 people died. One of the greatest natural disasters in the history of mankind. I told you that there was another instance of a non-natural flood. It had a human element to it. I pointed out that it occurred on October 17th, 1814. And I asked you, what was this flood that occurred in London on October 17th, 1814? The answer is that the Moe and Company Brewery had a beer vat rupture. A beer vat ruptured at a brewery, leading to other vats to rupture as well. It resulted in 388,000 gallons of beer spilling into the streets, destroying homes and killing 8 people. I mean, literally drowning in beer. A terrible, terrible tragedy. That was the answer. It was the Moe and Company Brewery, which had several vats rupture and 388,000 1,000 gallons of beer poured down the streets of London. That was the answer to question number 2. Question number 3, we talked about the Great Depression. We talked about in 1929, the stock market crash. It literally wiped out the fortunes of thousands of people, many of them millionaires who went from being millionaires to paupers overnight. It devastated the economy, not only of the United States, but the world as a whole. We talked about the fact that this devastated world economy actually played a dramatic role in the growth of Nazism in Germany, the dissatisfaction with no jobs, tremendous rising inflation led to people searching for answers, and Adolf Hitler pretended to have one of those answers, which led to a devastation that led to the death of over 60 million people. I pointed out, however, that there were many people that tried to help during the Great Depression, which really lasted for a good decade or longer. What really brought the United States out of the Great Depression was the entry into World War II. Literally 25 million men were given employment overnight. It was in the armed forces. But it did bring an end to the Great Depression. And of course, United States industry converted from a luxury economy to a necessity economy because of the war effort. Tanks, planes, ammunition, guns, etc. were just churned out overnight, creating millions of jobs for people as well. However, in 1939, before all of that took place, in Kansas, the wheat industry did something very gracious to assist during the Great Depression. And I asked you, what was it that the wheat industry did in Kansas in 1939 to help during the Great Depression? The answer? They discovered that women were using the flour sacks, the sacks that flour came in that they purchased in the store. They were reusing the sacks to make clothes for their children, dresses, etc., etc. As a result of that, the flour mills started putting floral prints on the fabric so that the children would have prettier dresses. That is what the wheat industry did in Kansas to try to help during the Great Depression. They learned that a portion of their industry was being reused by people that were struggling to get by, and they decided to do a little something to help. That was the answer to question number 3. You all know by now that the way to win at Quick Trivia is to get your answer to me by noon on Monday. But if 2 or more of you get the same number of questions correct, we do in fact have a tiebreaker. Once again, you know that my producer, Scott McFerrin, he edits in the music at the beginning and the end of the show. He edits in our intermission during the break. I'm not able to do all of that today. Shows just how much of an impact that Scott has on it. However, he did have bumper music last week. And the bumper music was the theme song from the Partridge Family. The theme song from the Partridge Family. Now you saw today, I'm not able to edit in songs like that. I probably could if I really putzed at it. I'm just playing some music off of YouTube. I hope you listened at the beginning of the show. I'm going to play some snippets of it at the end of the show as well. All right? So there you have it. Those were the answers to our questions. It was a ghost that helped in the evolution of chiropractics. It was a London flood of beer. And it was converting flour sacks into dresses by putting floral prints on them to make people a little bit happier. We actually didn't have anybody who got all 3 questions correct. Our winner, however, who did in fact identify the bumper music, Sandra Meyer. Welcome back to the winner's circle again, Sandra. I think if I'm not mistaken, this is 3 weeks in a row And congratulations to you. I also want to send out our best wishes to Alex Hill, another one of our champions from past weeks. He's recuperating from a little bit of a health issue. We wish him well, and we hope you are playing again very, very quickly, and all the rest of you as well. Get your answers into me. Maybe your picture will be on 955 all of next week, just like Sandra Meyer's going to be this coming week. There you have it. You know, at this time of the show, we usually take a brief intermission. Again, as I pointed out, Scott is the one who edits that in. We're not going to be taking a brief intermission. I'm just going to give you about 10 or 15 seconds to go grab that cup of coffee or a donut. Hurry back, I'll wait right here. Well, welcome back to the second half of our show. I hope you got yourself a little bit of a donut. I know I only gave you about 10 seconds there. But let's take a look at this week's questions, shall we? We're going to begin by taking a little bit of a look at the sport of gymnastics. It is a sport that includes physical exercises requiring balance, strength, flexibility, agility, coordination, and endurance. You know, it's an Olympic sport. The movements involved in gymnastics contribute to the development of arms, legs, shoulders, back, chest, and abdominal muscle groups. Gymnastics evolved from exercises used by the ancient Greeks that included skills for mounting and dismounting a horse, and from circus performance skills. Kind of interesting how entertainment has led into a sport. Of course, the most common form of competitive gymnastics today is artistic gymnastics, which consists for women of the floor events, the vault, the uneven bars, the beam, and for men the events of the floor, the vault, the rings, pommel horse, parallel bars, horizontal bar, etc., etc. There are also now in the Olympics is a trampoline as part of gymnastics. Interestingly enough, in scoring gymnastics, all of the competitors start with the same number of points. The way that the judges determine a winner is that they subtract points as the contestants make mistakes. And the winner is obviously the one who makes the fewest mistakes. You can earn the greatest potential of points by doing the most difficult routine, but that's not necessarily an obligation. Do the routine as best as possible, and I guess in theory do it perfectly. You could be the winner even though you don't do the most difficult routine. So there you have it. The other thing about gymnastics that I find very, very interesting is that it is actually one of the most dangerous sports with a very high injury rate, especially seen in girls ages 11 to 18. Compared to athletes of other sports, gymnastics are at a higher than average risk of overuse injuries and injuries caused by early sports specialization. Of course, you know, there are other sports like football that have injury concerns of their own. Chronic traumatic encephalitis, brain injuries, and things like that from head trauma. Be that as it may, gymnastics is a very dangerous sport, and I give a lot of credit to the athletes who participate. My question to you involves a particular athlete. On October 29th, 1904, George Iser, a German-American gymnast, competing in the Olympics, won 6 Olympic medals in a single day. An extremely impressive feat, made all the more significant because of a physical anomaly of George Iser that made gymnastics extremely difficult. My question to you, what was that physical anomaly that George Iser had, which made gymnastics extremely difficult? That, my friends, is question number 1. Question number 2, we're going to take a little bit of a look at crime fighting, specifically the science of fingerprinting. Fingerprints is an impression left by the friction edges of a human finger. The recovery of partial prints from a crime scene is an important method of forensic sciences to this day. Moisture and grease on a finger result in fingerprints on the surfaces. The moisture and grease is moved because of the friction ridges on our fingers. Fingerprint records normally contain impressions from the pad on the last joint of fingers and thumbs, though fingerprint cards also typically record portions of lower joint areas of the fingers. Human fingerprints are detailed and nearly unique to the minutest detail, difficult to alter, and durable over the life of an individual. They never change, making them suitable for long-term markers of identity. It really came into its own in criminal investigations in the 1930s in the United States. Latent fingerprints was a discovery in crime prevention and crime detection. It was the process of finding fingerprints on the inside of gloves and other surfaces, other discarded surfaces that people didn't realize could actually contain fingerprints. It was revolutionary in the art of fingerprint analysis. And actually, when collecting fingerprints, the people doing so, the police officers, etc., the criminologists, they'll simply use a powder. They'll, kind of dust it over the top of where they suspect the fingerprint is, and these ridges will reveal through the powder the imprints that were left by the person who touched there. My question to you regarding fingerprints. When did fingerprints first start being used? When did fingerprints first start being used? And I'm going to caution you, I told you about the evolution of fingerprint analysis in the 1930s. That's not what I'm talking about. When did fingerprints actually start being used? That is question number 2. Question number 3. I'm going to take a look at a historical event that led to a very famous piece of literature. We're going to look at the charge of the Light Brigade. The charge of the Light Brigade was a failed military action involving the British Light Cavalry against Russian forces during the Battle of Balaclava on the 25th of October, 1854. You'll notice a lot of the things I'm bringing up today have an October connection. And it was a result or a part of the Crimean War. Lord Raglan had intended to send the Light Brigade to prevent the Russians from removing captured guns from overrun Turkish positions, a task for which the Light Cavalry was well suited. However, there was miscommunication in the chain of command, and the Light Brigade was instead sent on a frontal assault against a different artillery battery. In essence, literally a suicide mission. The battery that they charged against was well prepared with excellent fields of defensive fire. The Light Brigade reached the battery under withering direct fire and scattered some of the gunners, but they were forced to retreat immediately, and their attack was unsuccessful. There was an extremely high rate of British casualties and no decisive gains. The charge, of course, was made by the Light Brigade of the British Cavalry, which consisted of the 4th and 13th Light Dragoons, the 17th Lancers, and the 8th and 11th Hussars. It actually was a little bit over 600 men that rode their horses through the Valley of Death. The Heavy Brigade was made up of the 4th Royal Irish Dragoon Guards, the 5th Dragoon Guards, and the 6th Inniskilling Dragoons, and the Scots Greys. They also joined in the charge of the Light Brigade. It was a light cavalry force, which was ideal for a charge, but not well suited for defending itself against artillery. You'll remember the Alfred Lord Tennyson in charge of the Light Brigade. Half a league, half a league, half a league on, all in the valley of death, rode the 600. Forward the Light Brigade. Charge for the guns, he said. Into the valley of death rode the 600. Forward the Light Brigade. Was there a man dismayed? Not though the soldier knew. Someone had blundered. Theirs not to make reply. Theirs not to reason why. Theirs but to do and die. Into the valley of death rode the 600. And the poem, of course, goes on for 3 more stanzas after that. Quite a living tribute to this day for that charge. And ironically, although the charge itself was a bitter defeat for the British cavalry, it actually brought great credit to the cavalry. It took about 2 weeks for the news to reach the homeland in London and England as a whole of the devastating loss. But the Light Brigade were heroes to their constituents at home, and it really set the cavalry up as a real testament to the British ability to follow through with orders regardless of someone's perception of potential for success. My question to you, and it's kind of an odd one, kind of a fun one. There is a unique tie to the charge of the Light Brigade and the wearing of sweaters. What is the unique connection between the charge of the Light Brigade and the wearing of sweaters? Kind of an interesting challenge there for you to try to mull over and see if you can come up with. You know by now how to win. Get your answers to me by noon on Monday. You can email me at mbrever@eastcastleplace.com. You can phone me at 963-8425 and leave a voice message. You can write your answers on a sheet of paper and slide them under my door. Or, as always, open the door. Open the door and put them on my conference table. The door is not locked. Or you can stop at the concierge desk and ask them to put it in my mailbox. I'll get it on Monday. Maybe you will be in the winner's circle, just like Sandra Meyer will be all this coming week. And don't forget about the bumper music. If you missed it at the beginning of the show, I'm going to play a little bit more of it at the end of the show. Identify that, and that is the bumper music. As always, I'd really like to thank the president of ECTV, Tyler Gudex, my executive producer, Laura Wengler, my cameraman and Scott McFerrin, my cameraman and producer, Scott McFerrin. Hurry back, Scott, you can see that you're missed. And as always, my artistic director, the incomparable Cooper Ledvina. Cooper's doing double duty this week. Thanks, Cooper. Couldn't have done it without you this week. I'd also like to thank all of you for taking the last 20 minutes to a half an hour and spending it with me. I hope you had a good time. I always have a good time with you and this show. So hopefully we all had a good time together. As always, I am your host and the Quizmaster, Mike Brever. Once again, thanks for tuning in. And until next week, so long, everybody. Now here's a little bit more of that bumper music. Just taking a minute. I love this song, by the way. My wife and I got married to this song. This was her wedding march down the aisle. So long, everybody.